a little bit, right? And I think a little bit more every month. The in-office experience. I don't know if I had to guess, I think people are starting to look at their leases and go, okay, this thing is going to stay on our books for the next 10 years. We should use this office. And I also think maybe another podcast, but I really do think that there's something to be said about going into the office with regard to productivity, psychological and emotional health, that kind of stuff. So people are unable to, live in San Diego and work in Portland like they were during COVID. And so they're moving and relocating for certain jobs. And that requires not just understanding the office culture and the culture of a certain company, right? But also understanding the culture of a specific area. And I thought to myself, what better to introduce this topic than to talk about Hawaii, which is a very unique culture and probably one of the top 2 or 3 in the country, right? So different from the mainland. So I wanted to bring you on and kind of talk about that. Is that something that you talk about with your, with folks who are moving to your part of the country?
Absolutely. Like you said, I mean, we are pretty isolated. If it wasn't for shipping lanes and all these things, I mean, Hawaii would be the most isolated place in the world, right? So thankfully, we are in the middle of the Pacific, which means we're a strategic point for shipping lanes, for, military, if you're a history buff, right? So, it does create some, I guess, convenience, right, being where we are, but also being where we are and having that influence from not just the mainland Americas, but also the Asias of, the Asian countries too. So our culture is kind of a mishmash of everything together, right? So it is significantly different from other places in the world. I mean, a little bits here and there, so you can see similarities and familiarities, but overall, it is significantly different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I think about, for example, I moved from New York to Las Vegas, and just being, changing that culture was very, very different. A lot of people said to me, "Why did you move to Las Vegas?" And actually, the reason is because it's slower. It's slower than New York, and people are like, "Really? Las Vegas is a pretty fast city." I'm like, "No, it's for me. It was nice and slow." But I'm fortunate enough I work at Cogent remotely, so I don't have to worry about the culture around me. I chose the location that I chose. Now, of course, we have our own company culture, and there are things that we do here that are unique, and I think that every company would say that. What if you can tell me, Scott, A, what's the culture like at American Savings Bank, and B, kind of a sub point, how do you feel, if it does at all, your surrounding, right, being in the geographical location that you are, how does that affect what you do differently at American Savings Bank?
Sure. So starting with American Savings, our culture, actually, it's something that we do hold near and dear. It is what we recruit based off of is people's character and their value add to our culture. Definitely, the work itself is very important. Can you do the job, right? We're a bank. We're tasked with managing and protecting people's money. So if you can't do the job, that's a huge no, right? I mean, we don't want people losing
Right.
money. But more importantly, like you said, is our culture. So, for example, we have 5 core expectations that we kind of check off the list to make sure that people resonate with these core expectations, which is that we relentlessly pursue an excellent customer experience, right? The customer experience is front and center in everything that we do. We also get stuff done the right way, not the easiest way, not the cheapest way, the right way, even if it means us working harder to provide, going back to the first one, to provide that excellent customer experience. Sometimes we got to do what you got to do for providing that extra jolt of customer experience, right? Along those lines, the third one is we embrace change and drive innovation with a sense of urgency. So, being stagnant, resting on your laurels, all those cliches and idioms and all that stuff. I mean, it's great once you get there, but to stay there, you remain stagnant for too long, you're not at the forefront anymore, right? So
Right.
to continuously work on improving, innovating, using technology, using, people's skill sets and everything, it's definitely something that we continue to strive to do. The fourth is to speak up, collaborate, and break down silos. So, everyone's voice is important. Sometimes it's just something that companies say just to sound like they're inclusive. We really try our best to actually make it a thing, right? So we have
Right.
engagement days twice a year. We have a message board on our intranet that anybody can go on. It's like our suggestion box. right?
Right.
You can go on, say, hey, why don't we do this? Or I've seen this happen somewhere else. Can we do this? Or why do we do this? It doesn't make sense. And I mean, our C-suite executives go in, take a look at that, and they actually reply to those messages.
That's
I
cool.
mean, that's how, yeah, that's how important our voice is. So speaking up, it is something that we expect, not just hope you do. It is an expectation. And breaking down silos, I mean, when you ask someone, oh, can you do this? Can you help me out and do this? And they're like, oh, I don't know. That's not my job. It's not part of my job description. It's like, that's not when you talk about inclusiveness, right? I mean,
Right.
it's not just about who you are and what you represent. It's also about working together to achieve a common goal, right? So it's all of that good stuff. And then the last one is, I think it kind of resonates with Cogent, is that everyone individually should take ownership of your own learning and self-development. So, if you want to be a manager, make it known. So going back, speak up, let us know that you want to be a manager. We can
Right.
help you get there, right? So the expectation for us is you tell us where you want to go. We'll tell you how to get there. We'll help you and support you along the way. But then it's back on you to make that happen, right? So it's a mutual relationship in
Yeah,
terms of
I love that.
career growth, development, and all that stuff. So that's kind of people coming in. That's what the expectations are for you and for us as a company, right? And then our mission, we have 4 pillars of our mission, which is based on our culture too. It's again going back to customers, right? Making banking easy for customers. If it's through technology, through our services, through our relationship building and everything. Delivering a high performance. So again, going back to getting stuff done the right way. Creating a great place to work. So recently, we have the best places to work ranking for it's a Hawaii business publication. We just got word earlier this month that this year again we are rated one of Hawaii's best places to work, and that's been 14 years in a row. So I mean, we are doing something right?
Yeah.
And then that last pillar in our mission is to bring real impact to our community. So that's something that is, we're very passionate about, is giving back to our community. Helping out Hawaii. We are a community bank. We're not a bank that the majority of our revenue comes from foreign investors or mainland investors. We are a local grassroots community bank in Hawaii, and that's part of our goal to continuously improve and help and support our community. So that's something that all of that together is ASB's culture.
I love that. I love it. So question, as those things come up, and I don't know if you mentioned it at the beginning and I spaced out. So these pillars and these 5 kind of things, I was watching the movie Air this weekend about Nike and how they got Michael Jordan, and it was really interesting. So I'm going to forget the CEO's name. I could tell you any other day, but he has all of these kind of like pillars and things that he believes in, his mantras of Nike, kind of like typed up and put on the wall. Are these things are they like documented on the wall somewhere? Are they somewhere where you can see?
Yeah. So one of our floors, it's like a training floor. All of our training rooms are there. Orientation happens over there for new hires and everything. On those walls, it's all over the place. On our computer, when you start it up, our 4 pillars, the mission is on everyone's computer as it starts up. When you go into our like employee kind of database, our 5 core expectations are there. Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, it's something that, if you want to call it a mantra, it's a mantra that everyone kind of owns and adopts and kind of runs with, lives with, all that good stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. So one of the things that I think about when I think about other banks, right? So they're typically, especially in the US, they're these big monsters companies, right? So you can kind of have your own personality, and not to say that folks at American Savings Bank don't, but you can kind of like do things your own way typically, because there's hundreds of thousands of other people that are doing things their own way. If that happens at American Savings Bank, what typically wins out? Does somebody typically go, oh shoot, that's not the way things are done, I need to really step up my game and be a more team player, a family player? Or do they go, you know what, this may not be a good fit for me?
It depends. I mean, so the worst answer to the question, why are we doing it this way, is, I don't know, that's how we've always done it, right?
Right.
How is that an acceptable answer to that question? So that is something that we do not like here. Definitely, like I said earlier, right, speak up. So question the status quo. That's the only way we can get better. That's the only way we can innovate and drive that improvement, right? That ongoing and continuous improvement. So now your question is which way wins out? It's the right way, right? The
Right.
way that it should be done for the sake of our customers, for the sake of our teammates, and all that stuff. So if it's the way that we've always done it, I mean, explain it out. Like let's play it out and let's see if there's a different way to do it. Why is it different? Not saying that you have to like build out a business proposal or anything, but like
Right.
does it really make sense to do it this way? And the great thing about ASB is that, you know, a lot of banks, not even just banks, but a lot of companies, and like you said, those big conglomerate companies, right? They're so massive that anytime you try to make a change that affects more than your department, or even if it just affects your department, but there's other things that affect everyone else, right? Like it takes so long to go through that approval process. You have multiple layers, everyone has to approve, right? You make any, or this person, this last approver says, oh, you should change it, or it doesn't work with us, then you got to go back, fix it up, and then reapprove it, right? Because things change. And all along those lines, right? If it takes months and then after everyone approves and they're like, oh, wait, hold on, we decided to go
Right.
another, right? Then all of that work was for naught, right? And for a big company to change direction, I mean, it's like stopping a cargo ship in the middle of the Suez Canal. Like, let's be real, right?
Right.
You're gonna fall and it's gonna back up everything else, right? ASB, we're not small, so we're about 1,100 people. So we're not small, but we're not big either, right? Like,
Right.
we feel like it's a good sweet spot to where we're big enough to create meaningful, impactful work, but we're small enough to where if something happens as we're launching, everyone's aligned because of our size, we can pivot faster.
Yeah. Right.
And because of that, we're not so scared. Like we don't have to check all the boxes
Yeah.
before we move on something. I mean, we're a bank, so we mitigate risk very well, but
Right.
at the same time too, if it makes sense, if it looks good, if it helps the customers, if it helps the teammates, we're okay to move forward without having all the answers laid out already.
Right.
And if it's something that we didn't, if we didn't think of and we launch, we're like, I mean, we should have changed that. We're
Right.
small enough, we're agile enough to be able to stop mid track, change, and then keep going, So that's something I really like about this company is, we are a bank, we mitigate risk well, but we're not afraid to take calculated risks. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And I think too, there's something to be said about, look, startups, and you're not a startup, right? Startups can do things real fast, but sometimes they haven't had the experience to know if it's the right decision or not, right? I love, mid-sized businesses because, like you said, they're not tens of thousands of people where they've got to pass it up 16 ladders to get something done. At the same time, you might have encountered a couple of things before that you're like, okay, you know what? We could at least start from the third rung of the ladder. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so that makes sense. So one of the questions I have, I know we've talked a little bit, Scott, folks, coming to Hawaii and the culture, maybe being a bit of a difference maker for them. Do folks often move to Hawaii to work at American Savings Bank? Like, do you find more of your candidates are coming from the islands, or they're coming from the mainland or somewhere else in the world?
I really, so if it's somebody not from Hawaii, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really dig into why they want to move here.
Yeah.
Because my worst fear is that they don't do their full due diligence to move here, whether it be cost of living, where they're going to live, anything, right? And they regret it. They move their life, they move their family, they move everyone here, right? Spend thousands of dollars sometimes to move their entire life here. And they come here and they're like, oh, I just got mugged. And it's like, yeah, we're a big city.
Right.
There's drug issues here. There's homelessness here. People are horrible drivers here. Not everybody, but you know what I mean? Like,
right.
You go to any Las Vegas, I'm sure you have similar complaints, right? Like, just because we're an island and, you come here for vacation doesn't mean that we're immune to these big city problems, right? So, I tell people, just because you found a cheap place to live, you got to look at the neighborhood. Like, where are you living? How far from town are you, right? Traffic's a pain here. I mean, you can't drive, around traffic. Like, you got to drive through it sometimes, right? So,
right.
Yeah. So, like, I think people that have never lived here before, that want to be here because they vacationed or what have you, like, I almost talk them out of coming.
Right.
Because sure that they're coming for the right reasons. Now, to answer your question, the vast majority of our hires are either people currently in Hawaii or they moved away for school or for work and they want to come back, right? So
Back,
they
yeah.
have that one, they have that they're completely aware of what it takes to live here. Two, more often than not, they have a support system here, right? That culture shock, that whatever you want to call it, like having your family, close friends, someone to lean on when those when you got robbed, when you got burglarized, when your car
Right.
got stolen, whatever it is, right?
Right.
You have
Traffic,
that
whatever.
support system. Yeah, right, exactly. You have that support system to help you out, to lean on, to for you to vent to, all that good stuff, right? So that it's not that bad versus you're here by yourself, everything gets ripped away from you. I mean, right, you get massively homesick and you're gone before you even unpack, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
No fun. So that's, I mean, it's really interesting, especially too, you mentioned like that kind of big city life, because I think people probably look at Hawaii and they see the movies or they've been there, and living on a resort is a lot different than living in the city. And the same thing I tell folks when they want to come to Vegas, I'm like, oh man, I want to eat here, and I'm like, well, there's like 1,000 places that I could take you to that are not on that 1 mile of strip that you have. But sure, if you want to pay $400 for a steak, I'll get a water. So I get it. So I would imagine though, when folks do come back from college or whatever, or they lived elsewhere and they come back, sounds like American Savings Bank's super open. What kind of opportunities does that bring to you as somebody who, may see things a little differently?
Yeah, well, I think people that have lived away and want to come back, there's a reason, right? They want to come back.
Yeah.
Either they miss family, they miss, like you said, I mean, Hawaii is slower than pretty much anywhere else in the US, right?
Right.
So, maybe they miss that, or they want to start, a lot of them, they have a family and they're like, oh, I want to raise my kids the way I was raised back in
Yeah.
Hawaii. Right, with the community and everything, it's relative, comparatively safer, maybe depending on where they're currently living or whatnot. But yeah, so it's. Well, sorry, what was the question again?
The question was, what kind of opportunities do those folks bring back to you?
Oh, right. Sorry.
When they're coming. No, you're fine.
I think it's a different perspective, right? Living in Hawaii, doing the same thing since you were in high school, pretty much. A lot of people have friends that have never left here, and
Right.
a lot of them, they're doing the same thing that they were doing when we were in high school, or their vision, their perspective is just for Hawaii, in Hawaii, for Hawaii people living in Hawaii, right? Like someone coming from the mainland, they've worked with maybe a multinational company, or they've experienced things that people that never lived here didn't experience before, right? So having that insight, that broader kind of perspective really, really helps, not just ASB, but I think just Hawaii in general, right? Like there's a really big problem. It's been a problem for decades, is the brain drain, where just opportunities are greater on the mainland. So a lot of people, once they leave for college, they don't come back, right? And the candidate pool, the job market really suffers because of that. So, bringing people back for their perspective, for their experience that you wouldn't be able to find here necessarily, that's huge. That's huge, and hopefully we can do that more. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I never thought of the brain drain as far as people leaving Hawaii and not wanting to come back. I mean, who wouldn't want to come back?
Yeah.
So really
expensive.
Cool.
So.
Yeah, right. Now, I had a colleague who he did all the research, and this was an earlier part of his career. He did all the research, and he was just like, he knew. He looked at the numbers that he was making and that his wife was making, and he knew it was going to be a struggle. And he just said, you know what? We're going to do this 3-year contract. We're going to enjoy our lives on Hawaii, and we're going to live as poorly as we can. He found somebody was like leaving, like the opposite. Somebody was like leaving to go to the mainland for a contract and didn't want to sell their home. He found like a really inexpensive place, and he was able to like live and survive. And he said, I just wouldn't. He's like, I had my coffee every morning and went for a surf or went for a swim. And he's like, I didn't care how much it cost. I knew what I was getting into. So I think that's probably the mindset you want to have going in.
For sure.
Very cool. Very cool. So I remember, Scott, one of the first conversations that we had, we've been chatting probably for 2 years or so, was about culture and about the different cultures around the country. And I cited this book. I don't know if you had a chance to read it or just I can talk a little bit about it, was the 11 nation states of the United States. So the theory is that, and it's been proven time and time again, that there are other parts of the country too that are vastly different from one another. So my question to you is, so this kind of, and I don't want to misquote because I don't know if you said the word or not, but this kind of culture shock that happens when we move to Hawaii. Do we think this happens a lot in other parts of the country, or do we think it's a little bit more amplified at a place like Hawaii or let's say Alaska, which is not on the mainland?
Oh, I'm sure there's culture shock no matter where you go, right? Like anyone from Hawaii moves to the mainland, it's culture shock too, right?
Right,
like,
right.
So I went to school up in the mainland, and one of the things that they told us, so in Hawaii, right, when you're going to school, if you have something to say or if you have a question, you raise your hand and you wait to get called on. But on the main, like, no, you just start talking and the teacher will, so having Hawaii students get used to just shouting stuff out in class, like that was something that all of us had to get used to, right? But for someone on the mainland, they're like, what? Why would you raise your hand? They're not going to call. Right. You need to make it known, right? So it's that kind of stuff. No matter where you go, I mean. So yeah, I have no doubt. So I before coming back to Hawaii after college, I lived in Japan for 10 years, and I'm Japanese, but I've never lived in Japan before. And Hawaii, there's a lot of Japanese influence in terms of culture and stuff, but you live there where everything is like that. I mean, yeah, I had culture shock too. And coming back home, it was reverse culture shock. It's like, wow, I don't have to wear a suit anymore,
right.
Stuff like that, right? So yeah, no doubt. No matter where you go. Even nuances, right? New York versus Las Vegas. I mean,
right.
You ask someone for the time in Las Vegas, they might give it to you. You ask someone for the time in New York, go get a phone, man, or
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're right. So yeah, no doubt. No matter where you go, you're gonna.
I noticed in New York too. When so I lived outside of New York for my whole life, and then I worked in New York and lived in New York for a couple of years. I noticed in New York that a lot of folks didn't even try to be polite. Like it wasn't even like they were going to like pretend to open the door for you. Like they just didn't. And that's cool. And it was almost like they were doing you a favor by not even trying. You know what I mean? Like that was their way of being nice, which I thought was very funny. You mentioned moving back and moving to different places. So I went to school about 4 hours north of New York City, which is, I mean, sure, in the grand scheme of things, not very far away, but as far as culture is very different. It's a lot more of a rural area. I had a mentor who was from New York City, and he said to me, he moved up to that area when he was in his 20s, and he said, in the next couple of years, I'm going to own this town because I know how to move quickly. Well, he lives up there for a couple of years, and he comes back down for like a family reunion, and he goes back down to New York City, and he said he couldn't believe how fast-paced it was. He had already acclimated kind of to that pace. So I would imagine that happens in Hawaii as well. You probably kind of get your footing back again.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, even as simple as the speed that you walk, right? When you're walking in New York, you got to keep up with everyone. When you walk in Vegas, like you're weaving through because everyone's walking so slow, right? And it's not something that you're like consciously doing. It's just part of keeping up with people, right? So for sure.
We used to, one of the cool things you'll know if you meet somebody from New York, I don't know if this is in other parts of the country, but I found it unique to New York. If you're walking somewhere in a big city, you'll notice that New Yorkers will know their final destination, and they don't really care how they get there. So the map might say go straight and take a right, but if you've got to go 6 blocks, you're going to zigzag. Every time you see a red light, you're going to zigzag to get there. And so a lot of times you'll be zigzagging, and you'll see somebody kind of zigzagging next to you, and you go, either from New York or from a big city for sure. And I would imagine in Hawaii, you're probably just chilling a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say. Well, yeah, I mean, I would say so. There, people. It does seem people are more in a hurry nowadays. Whatever the reason is, but yeah, I mean, people say Hawaii time for a reason, right? Like
right.
Hawaiian time. I mean, that still holds true for sure.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, right? I think the world is getting a little bit smaller. There are so many great things that culturally, I mean, foods, music, other things that are coming to not just the mainland, but to America, right? And in general. And I think with that also comes some negative, right? So, I think that American fast-paced attitude, that New Yorker, attitude, as people move to other parts of the country or do business now, kind of closing that gap, you do start to see people speed up a little bit. And I kind of wish that was one thing that stayed where it was.
Yeah, that would be nice for sure.
So we talked a little bit about culture. One thing that I was thinking about too was, what about other like kind of culture shocks, or other than geography? One thing I talk about a lot on my podcast and is that we've got a lot of generations at work right now. People are not only aging and living, which is great, living longer years, I should say, but they're working longer, unfortunately, because we probably have to. And now we've got folks coming, Gen Z, and I think there's even another generation right on its tail. A lot of 4 or 5 generations at work right now. What have you noticed? It just, and this could be talent acquisition, doesn't have to be in Hawaii, but what have you noticed that generations are saying about the way in which they perceive the culture at work?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like the older generation, right? They care about working, purpose, security. I mean, money, right? Everyone cares about money, right?
Right.
Whereas the generation, it's more about like inclusivity and does my voice matter, and like give back, even philanthropy, right? A lot of when I'm talking to interns, for example, one of the things that really, when they perk up when I talk about our community service events and the give back and stuff, like they're like, oh wow, I love that. I love giving back to the community and environmental sustainability and all these things. So not to say that the older generation doesn't like that. It's just
No,
they're
yeah.
on the job itself, right? Whereas the younger generation is, well, yeah, okay, the job is good. Definitely, you need to pay me for my work, but what are you, company, doing to
Right.
ensure, right, the world stays good for me and my kids, because you guys are going to retire, whatever they're thinking, right? Like, you guys are going to retire soon, or like, what are you doing to ensure that this company is around for me and for my kids and for the next generation and stuff? So they are looking at it from a more holistic view, I feel, for sure.
And I kind of like that. It's interesting that you say that too, because we've even noticed that at Cogent, right? So as I get a little bit older, I'd like to think I still relate to students, but I have noticed that they are getting a little bit, young folks are getting a little bit more selective about where they're going to hang their hat for a little bit, because they do want to make sure that the place they work for has integrity and is giving something back. Whereas I think back in the day, we were just, back in the day, I need to go like watch some cartoons or something. But when I was looking for a job, I was just so happy, right? I was just so happy to get a job. I would find my place later, but for now I wanted to do that. And people, I think it's a good thing, right? So people are really, they're more focused on this, one planet, everyone kind of moving in the right direction. And we still do have to coach our students though a little bit about, and I've done this for, the past decade, even in higher education, but look, doing that is great. And you'll find places like American Savings Bank that do care, but also do make sure that your best interest is at the forefront, because you can give back a lot more when you're 50 than you can when you're 25. So set yourself up for success. So I think that's super important that we teach our youth to also do well for themselves.
For sure. Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. So what about folks changing to different roles? So one of the things that I've noticed is moving, let's say, from corporate to higher education, back to corporate again, very different roles. I was kind of in a sales role, and then went back to academia. Do you have folks moving around at American Savings Bank, or just in general in your career and talent acquisition? What tends to be a difference in the way that people perceive their new environment when they change positions?
Like changing within one company, or changing like different companies?
It can be either or. I was kind of thinking within the company, but if you have an example of somewhere else, that's cool too.
Within the company, I mean, the thing about ASB is we support, encourage internal mobility, right? That's something that we continue to try to improve on, in terms of like identifying the high performers and putting them on a track based on what they want to do in their career. If it's people management, if it's growing into, like, from a teller growing into like an analyst role or something else, right? Like,
yeah,
we identify those folks, talk to them, see what they really want to do, what they're really passionate about, and kind of put them on a path to get there. So, but external, yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people leave and wanted to come back, right? If it's they wanted to change industries, or
right.
they wanted to, so like I knew someone that started in, or that came from the airline industry, came into banking, did that for a little while, wanted to go back to airlines because that person wanted to get a pilot's license, got the
Cool.
pilot's license, and then came back to banking after that. So,
Right.
yeah, like sometimes it's that split between work and passion too, right? Like
Yeah.
really want to get a pilot's license, but I feel that banking is a more stable industry because of everything that's happened in the
Yeah.
last 2 to 3 years, right? So, yeah, it happens. It happens quite often, I would say. But the thing is, like going back to perspectives from people coming from the mainland. You come from another company. There's also perspectives that we can use too. That's really valuable
Yeah.
too. So,
Yeah.
there's benefits in all of that stuff. So, yeah, we see it happen for sure.
Very cool. And that particular employee, I don't think you're going to have a hard time between being a pilot or a banker. You're probably in pretty good shape either way. Those would be two of the people that I would, if I were picking my crew for the Oregon Trail, I would definitely pick the pilot and the banker for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to make sure that we value your time, and also, I feel like with talk about culture, the way that our attention span is, we'll wrap up in the next couple of minutes. Last couple of questions that I kind of had are kind of as a wrap up question. I think that, tech has been playing a huge role. And as we mentioned, right, the world's getting smaller in how we perceive culture. And I think in a great way, it's very often we see people researching other cultures, not just to be, politically correct and sound okay, but to truly genuinely understand a different culture. Right. Mm-hmm. That for me, I think, is one of the things that makes my life a little bit easier. Is before I talk to someone, we have a lot of folks, for example, who are based in India in our company. I can Google the way to pronounce someone's name and hear it phonetically before I even have to speak to that person, which is super important. So what do we think about, is it easier or harder for us now that this kind of world is getting smaller than, let's say, it was 20 years ago? And going forward, do you think it's going to get easier or more challenging as we get more information, navigating all different cultures?
I think it's both, right? Both good and bad. And it depends how you're looking at it. So in terms of convenience, like tech has made things so convenient. Like you said, I mean, I can do my entire job pretty much from my phone.
Yeah.
Right? Pretty much, right? At the same time too, because I always have my phone on me, the expectation is that I'm always reachable, right?
Yep.
So it's easier, but it's harder because now I don't have a private life sometimes because I'm getting blown up all the time, right? So it's good if I was like an agency recruiter where I'm commission based. That's good. I can make money all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it depends on your situation, on your predicament, whatever you want to call it, right? So I think it's good and bad. The other good thing is remote work, like we're talking about, right? A lot of companies, and in fact, the other week we got notice that we're going to start coming back soon, more often into the office. So like you said, it's only a matter of time before that starts happening more, right? But when someone who could have predicted COVID, in the way that it did, right? I mean, the same thing happened 100 years ago, but we didn't have computers. We didn't have all these things 100 years ago. So having to work and the way the world is now, being able to do it remotely, and we were able to do it in such a short amount of that transition happened so quickly because of technology, right? And there were still bugs, hiccups or whatever, but I mean, compared to even 20 years ago, would we have been able to flip that quickly?
No.
There's no way, right?
The world would have stopped for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I mean, Hawaii would have been even in worse shape because everything stopped, right? But anyway, so, tech, it's good and bad. Now, going forward, I mean, I think the biggest thing on everyone's mind is AI, right? How is AI going to impact everybody?
Scares me every day.
Yeah. I mean, to the point now for education, right? Like you said earlier, there's so many things that you can find online, whether it's legit or not, right? I mean, there's so much false information on the internet, but if you wanted to teach yourself, there are resources to do that, right? So how is education going to get impacted? That's a huge thing, right? Banking, I mean, we're getting to the point where we I would say in maybe 5 years, we're not going to need a branch anymore because you can do everything that you want either online or on your phone.
Yeah,
right?
Very true.
So, and then AI is going to get to the point where it can answer all of your questions and it can do
Right.
your banking for you or what have you. So, yeah, what's banking going to look like? What's HR? What's recruitment going to look like? Who
Right.
knows? Like, I mean, I have my opinions, but you know, tech changes so quickly that my opinions now won't be valid in a few years because they're
Right.
going to figure out solutions to it, right? So,
Yeah.
you know,
Actually, I wrote a paper a couple of years ago about the way that we speak technology, and I wanted to publish more of it, a bit more of it this year. And I looked at it and I go, I have to redo the whole thing. It doesn't make sense.
yeah,
It's fun. You know, you mentioned one thing, and I thought it was really funny. You mentioned how, you know, we're looking to come back to work now a little bit, and it was, you know, it was really easy to get back to you know, to get back to work even though we were stuck at home. So a bunch of years ago, probably about 10 or maybe even more, 12 or 14 years ago, there was a huge snowstorm in New York, and a bunch of us just couldn't make it to the office, just couldn't make it in. And a week or two later, like literally an identical snowstorm comes in. We had like a kind of an older vice president who would come from grocery and retail, and he wrote an email to everyone just before the snowstorm happened. He's like, just as a reminder, you know, working from home is not in your comp plan and blah, 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 blah. So you will be in the office or you'll sacrifice a day. Well, I didn't do this and I kind of wish I did, but one of my coworkers about a week later got a phone call at like 6, 7 o'clock at night from this vice president. And I was like, aren't you going to answer that? We were out for drinks. He goes, no, working from home is not in my comp plan. So we're not going to answer it. So, you know, it's just so interesting how now we are kind of, you know, with that, I know you have the ability to work from home. So now I kind of know you have the ability to work from home. It's a double-edged sword.
yeah, exactly. Good and bad, right? So,
Yeah. Exactly. Well, Scott, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. Really, I mean, so much fun chatting with you, and I always do love hearing from you. You know, are there any final thoughts you kind of want to leave with our folks here at Coaching Conversation?
No, I mean, I appreciate you having me. It was a great conversation. Happy to do this anytime. But no, I mean, you know, hopefully we can use some of your coaching students, you know, going forward and everything, right? Like you said, tech is the future. So, you know,
Absolutely.
you are doing good work, and hopefully we're able to find good homes for some of your students, you know. So,
Awesome. We hope so too, Scott. And for anybody who's watching, I did not pay Scott $60 to say that. So
yeah. It was only $20, but I'll take it.
It was only 20. Very cool. So we have a quick question from Kartik. Some advice for freshers or double-minded, scared about moving. Real quick. This is a good question before we leave. What would your advice be to somebody who might be scared about moving to a new location? Then I'll wrap that up and then we'll head on.
Do your research. When you think you research enough, research some more. I mean, you can't have enough information or too much information when you're moving. You know, price everything out. Find somebody that's lived there for a number of years. I mean, so like Hawaii, right? We've talked about how expensive it is. Everybody knows how expensive Hawaii is, and it is. It's expensive to live, to eat, to drive. I mean, it's still $4 or $5 a gallon for gas, and it'll. I mean, low for us is like $3 something a gallon, right?
Yeah, same thing here. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, but at the same time too, there are a lot of local markets here, right? Farmers markets. There are ways to stretch your dollar, so to speak.
Yeah.
Grow your own food. So they're just don't be scared. Like if you find something that you're worried or scared about, research ways to circumvent that. You know, there are options here. Like people can live here pretty frugally.
Yeah. I always joke with people because they don't do their research, right? I go, you know, I used to do this, believe it or not, when because I made a good deal of money in my 20s. I used to not look at my bank account because I thought if I didn't look at my bank account, I wouldn't know how much money I was spending. But the reality is it was coming out whether I was looking at it or not. So yeah, absolutely. You know, do your research on something that scares you because it's still gonna be there. You know, you'll just know about it. I would take that same approach, and I would add to at the end of the day, do it. Right. At the end of the day, if you've got a great opportunity to work for a company or work in a role that you know can set yourself up, figure it out and do it. I was, you know, I moved around New York City, but never really moved away until I hit my 30s. And I will say that it was the best thing I could have done. I wish I had done it 10 years ago. And you know, figure it out, right? If you need to teach, tutor math online for a couple hours a week to make some money, or Uber or whatever you have to do. Like, I would love to say that I lived in Hawaii for a couple of years. So save me a spot at American Savings Bank next time I'm looking.
Yeah. And like you said, right, do your research. Like, it's not going to make you less scared, but it's going to prepare you for what may happen. Right.
Yeah.
So at least you'll know what to do if it comes up. Right. It's not going to, yeah. So anyway.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, thank you so much, and thanks for everybody who was listening. And I mean, you're probably watching this on a replay, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Scott, we want to thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your it's afternoon finally there.
Still
morning. Yeah, it's still morning. Awesome. Well, we finally hit afternoon in Vegas. So thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for coming to Coaching's Conversation. We appreciate you. And until next time, folks, have a good one, and we'll see you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care. See you, Chris.
You got it.